Power on.
The following is a presentation of the Sovryn Tech podcast feed.
It's Fighter Renegades, a Star Wars podcast.
Ooh, it is a hot one on Ice Planet Zero. So if you hear a humming in the background, that is the mighty air conditioner in Rob's museum. And boy, am I surrounded. Here to talk Star Wars, folks, because of course this is TIE Fighter Renegades. And man, I am just surrounded by Star Wars greatness in this museum. It is really something special. Someday, maybe we'll share some pictures. But anyway, I am of course recording on my trusty dusty H1N. And we have got a review to get into, baby. This is coming hot off the heels of my recent review of the War of the Bounty Hunters comic book series, which ran through a huge chunk, really, of 2021. And 2022 has been followed up by what's really turning into a trilogy, but was followed up by a comic crossover series by Marvel called Crimson Reign, and it is absolutely a direct sequel to the events of War of the Bounty Hunters. Now, I want to talk about this, and I'll open up just as I did with War of the Bounty Hunters to say that, frankly, what's happening in the comic books, not so much, well, we'll save conversations around the High Republic for a future episode, but what's happening in the comic books is easily the best and most exciting Star Wars regularly being pumped out today in 2022. I loved War of the Bounty Hunters. Crimson Reign did not disappoint on any marks from what was already done in War of the Bounty Hunters. Again, this is a direct sequel. And this series, Crimson Reign, is being followed up by, and spoiler alerts, of course, but it's being followed up by what the character of Kira said at the end of Crimson Reign issue number 5, which was the final issue of the main series of this crossover series. Her Hidden Empire. And in August, we will start getting the Hidden Empire crossover series, or at least I assume it's going to be a crossover series. I'm not 100% clear on that, because the comics that have come out throughout July, be it in the Dr. Aphra, the Darth Vader, Star Wars Volume 2, in the Bounty Hunter series, the last issue for each of those was not directly Crimson Reign related. I mean, it's dealing with the aftermath, of course, but they didn't have exactly that Crimson Reign moniker. So I'm not sure if this is actually going to be a big crossover event like War of the Bounty Hunters and Crimson Reign were, but I'd be totally fine if it is. And that series will end up being called Hidden Empire. Now, this trilogy, that being, again, War of the Bounty Hunters, Crimson Reign, and then Hidden Empire, is, again, like I said with War of the Bounty Hunters, this is Disney's Shadows of the Empire, right? If you remember Shadows of the Empire by Steve Perry, not that Steve Perry, the other Steve Perry. If you remember Shadows of the Empire, by Steve Perry, who did the novel, then of course Shadows of the Empire again was a transmedia event where there was a video game, and being joined by Dexter here in the studio, but there was a video game, as well as you had a comic book series. In fact, there was a sequel comic book series. There was even, an audio CD, a making of book. Yes, a making of book about a book. There was also an art book, for a book, and kind of related to the comic books. But Shadows of the Empire was a huge deal back in the 90s when that first came out. Something that seemingly had George Lucas's blessing, as much as any Star Wars fiction outside of the films or TV would. This is Disney's answer to that. And, opening this up, I mean, for me, one of the most exciting things to come out of it is finally the direct mention of Prince Shizor, who is the Faline character who's the head of the Black Sun Syndicate who was introduced in Shadows of the Empire, also met his end in Shadows of the Empire. Now, there have been, like visual dictionaries and other reference material for Star Wars since Disney took over for the new canon, as we call it, that I believe have referenced, and I have it all, and I've read most of it, maybe not the Interesting Facts book, but I've read most of it. There might have been mentions of Shizor in some of that, but really when I think it gets serious is when Disney allows a character to, at the very least, get mentioned in an actual storyline, not just in a, in reference material, not just in like an encyclopedia or something like that. Because frankly, and hey, believe me, I'm as pissed off at Disney about this as anyone else. There have been multiple occasions since Disney took over where, again, and everything's supposed to be canon, but where new canon reference material has been contradicted in the stories told. I mean, the stories have contradicted themselves at times too, even though Disney was supposed to keep this shit straight. Clearly they're not. But regardless, when it's finally in some kind of a story, it gets more exciting. Similarly, something that I will be reviewing soon, which is the novel Shadows of the Sith, that just came out in June. In Shadows of the Sith, we finally get mention of Darth Revan. Darth Revan, of course, the character from the Knights of the Old Republic video games. Now Revan's been mentioned in, reference material, in like visual dictionaries, but he's never really been mentioned directly in a story. Now he finally is in a novel. Similarly, this is the case with Prince Shizor, where, he's mentioned, and directly threatened, by Kira in the comic series of Crimson Reign. Now, I'm hoping that he ends up showing up in Hidden Empire, because what we do know from the Crimson Reign, the main comic series, which went 5 issues, a 5-issue miniseries, but again bled into Darth Vader and everything else, and Dr. Aphra and all that, is so one of the characters that is part of the Crimson Dawn organization that Kira runs, and of course Kira is the character from Solo: A Star Wars Story. One of the characters that works with her is a woman called the Archivist. And the Archivist opens up issue 1 of Crimson Reign saying, Kira is the most amazing woman, blah, 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 blah. But this is not a story of praise. This is a story of tragedy. So we know, and I mean, we kind of know from at least some of what we know from Return of the Jedi and post-Return of the Jedi, that, or at the very least, it seems like Crimson Dawn is not a part of the program. So something bad's got to happen here. I don't know what, but something bad's got to happen here. And I would be totally on board if Prince Shizor comes in and says, I'm sick of your shit, to Kira, and, the Black Sun ends up wiping out the Crimson Dawn. I mean, there's even there's kind of beautiful, I could already, see the script for this and some of the dialogue where there's arguments over who, because you have Crimson Dawn, right, which is a sun, and then you have, the Black Sun, and, there could even be jokes about there can only be one star or something like that, or not jokes, but, jabs, which I could really dig. I'd be totally on board with, because we know that the Faline species, they're a lizard race, they can give off pheromones that can assist in the seducing of human beings. And I'd be fine if, something along that lines happens, similar to what happened in Shadows of the Empire, where Prince Shizor was, seducing Princess Leia. And I mean, I have to say, because the comic books, in my opinion, have not shied away from from more adult themes, which I applaud. That's worked out very well. Certainly in the Dr. Aphra comics, it's a little more blatant, and again, that's okay. But that's just a bit of a prediction on my part that could be what's coming. There are certainly plenty of other characters, powerful characters, that I think could come in and really fuck with Kira's little insurgency, her conspiracy with her hidden empire, again, whatever that exactly means. I mean, real quick, I'm not surprised at all that she didn't call it her Crimson Empire, because that, of course, would confuse things with the phenomenal comic book series, which also ended up being effectively its own trilogy, or at least you had 1 and 2, of Crimson Empire, which was where, like, Kyrkanos and other characters that were part of the Emperor's Royal Guard after Return of the Jedi end up creating, like, their own version of the Empire. I mean, those are some of my favorite comics of all time. So I applaud her calling it her Hidden Empire, not her Crimson Empire. But anyway, I mean, the interesting thing is, okay, well, wait, I got to go back and finish what I was saying. There are plenty of powerful characters to do the deed here, to finish off what Crimson Dawn is trying to do. You have, and this is one of the best parts of this whole Crimson Reign miniseries, is Sabe, of course, who we know survived much of, or, who survived the Jedi Purge, who survived through the prequel era and into the, Imperial era. And she's working with Vader now. And honestly, I think it's amazing. And I want to bring this up because I think some people might have critiques of this. So Sabe, of course, handmaiden to Padme Amidala back in the day, and in episode 1 was played by Keira Knightley. I've brought her up recently in reviews, the character of Sabe, saying I would be totally on board if she ended up living well past Return of the Jedi, and they ended up doing a movie or TV series around her and bring in Keira Knightley, to play the part. Like that'd be fantastic. But I don't know if we're going to get that, and, she might meet her doom as well, because, again, right now she's working directly with Vader. Now, Sabe knows and finds out throughout Crimson Reign, she recognizes that Vader, based upon things that he says and does, that he's Anakin Skywalker, and she confronts him with as much, fearlessly at that. It's really badass. Sabe's become a phenomenal character. In fact, I said this before I think I was reviewing the Queen's trilogy of books by E.K. Johnston, where I said, honestly, Sabe is becoming a better character than Padme ever was. Not that I'm necessarily knocking the character of Padme, but I'm just saying that, Sabe's really come full circle here. And become a very rich character. Now, some people may say, but wait a minute, Stallion, you said in yours and Rob's review of Obi-Wan Kenobi that you thought it was ridiculous and preposterous that Reva, or really that anyone, knows that Vader is Anakin Skywalker, outside of course, Tarkin's suspicions of it, as well as Thrawn's suspicions of it. Well, here's the thing. The problem is that Reva has no, pedigree and doesn't have the history, and they sure as fuck didn't write a good one to even try to convince us of it, she's not powerful enough a character. She doesn't have enough history in the saga to be somebody that we would, that I think deserves to have that kind of, ultimately that kind of power, which that is, knowledge is power, and having that knowledge, the best kept secret in the Star Wars galaxy, she didn't earn it, is the point. As to where Sabe absolutely earned it, because here's a character who's been there the whole way, knew Padme better than anybody, arguably even better than Anakin Skywalker. She's got all the pedigree she needs, and is a character that has been so well written over the past few years that you believe it, and you also believe that, okay, Vader wouldn't kill this character or whatever. I mean, it works. It works really well, and her effectively siding with Vader and kind of joining the Empire and wanting to bring order to the universe, her reasoning, unlike Reva, Sabe's reasoning makes perfect sense. And full credit to Greg Pak, who is just slaying it on writing with the Darth Vader comic, and has been for a while now. And of course, Charles Soule with those two guys are really bringing this whole comic universe together for Star Wars, and it's working exceptionally well. So I thought that was really cool. And her, putting on kind of quasi stormtrooper armor and everything, it just works. It's also great to get more of Ochi of Bestoon, who's been a major character throughout this. Also a character in the Shadows of the Sith novel that I'm presently reading. Look, I'm just going to give you a clue in with Shadows of the Sith. It's very rare that I recommend people read a Star Wars book because they've been so lackluster, or a lot of them have been lackluster as late. Shadows of the Sith, I mean, if I were to give you a quick review here, Shadows of the Sith is the novel that the Aftermath trilogy should have been when those came out in like 2013, 2014, and so on. Like, this is the sequel to Return of the Jedi we really should have gotten, or at least in a lot of ways. So take that for what you will. I'm not going to say it's a perfect book. I'm still getting through some of it, but everything's coming together really nicely. Like, a lot of what you learn about Ochi of Bestoon and so on plays well into the Shadows of the Sith novels. So you really want to get that full picture by reading the comics as well as the novels at present. Anyway, so something else that, yeah, like I said with Sabe, she's in that, in my opinion, she's in that level of character like Tarkin and Thrawn, where, okay, yeah, these are characters powerful enough and that like are actually a match, as it were, for Vader, that, you know, they can hold the knowledge of who Vader is, and again, and it makes sense. With Reva, I mean, that just wasn't so, and it was bad writing, and it just didn't make any sense from the get-go. And even what she did with that knowledge made even less sense, as to where, you know, what does Sabe do? Again, she joins Vader. Really kick-ass stuff. I guess while we're talking about the dark side here, some other great dark side elements to this, and things that, just like experiencing more of Ochi of Bestoon, again, who's a major plot point for Rise of Skywalker, the movie, and it's good to have that make more sense. Something else that is starting to make more sense, you get more of the Knights of Ren, which you find out have been a dark side organization for centuries at least. And they really click in this. They work. Of course, you got more of them in the Kylo Ren comic that came out before the Rise of Skywalker, was released. But I love what they're doing with the Knights of Ren in this and explaining more of how they use the dark side and what they are. And as you experience more of them, and you're going to get more of them in the Hidden Empire, pretty much guaranteed, as you experience more of the Knights of Ren, you kind of see that they end up taking, and have always wanted to, they end up taking the place of the Sith. And so they're filling in, the sequel trilogy, they're effectively filling in the vacuum that is the lack of dark side users. That's more or less what you discover. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I will give Disney credit, and certainly War of the Bounty Hunters and Crimson Reign have been really working at this, as well as shows like The Mandalorian and so on, where they are creating the backstory that we really fucking needed for the sequel trilogy to make any kind of sense. Now, the easiest thing would have been for Disney to have a vision for what a trilogy of movies, what the story was going to be. We didn't get that. That would have been the easiest thing to do. That would have been great, but that didn't happen. But in the aftermath, no pun intended, we are getting the plot holes and everything else. Everything else is getting in, and plot points are getting filled in. And more or less, I like what's being put down. More or less, it's working. There are other great moments throughout Crimson Reign, a lot of which has nothing to do with, ultimately, with the Crimson Dawn, the organization. I have been loving what Charles Soule is doing with the Volume 2 of the main Star Wars comic, and you've been getting a lot of this another powerful character, and also what I appreciate, another powerful female character. I mean, this is something else that's amazing here, and I've actually applauded Disney for this since 2013. Like, they have doubled the amount of female characters in Star Wars. Not doubled, they've exponentially increased the amount of female Star Wars characters. And they did that almost overnight. And I applaud them for that, because if you're a longtime Star Wars fan, we didn't really get another, kick-ass female Star Wars character with depth until, Heir to the Empire in the 90s with, Mara Jade, right? That's how long in Winter, that's how long we had to wait. Even when we got the prequel trilogy, George Lucas didn't bring in a ton of female characters. You basically got Padme, yeah, you got Shmi, but it's been lackluster as to where Disney's just letting them come right in. I mean, this whole, trilogy that we're talking about, comic book trilogy that we're talking about here, is in many ways the story of Princess Leia Sabe, more so than even Vader, Sabe, as well as Kira. I mean, they're the heavy hitters. And then add on to that, who's the heavy hitter for the Empire outside of Vader? The heavy hitter there is none other than, well, if you've been reading Volume 2 of Star Wars, you know this character, that being Commander Zara. Commander Zara is the captain, leader of the Tarkin's Will, the Star Destroyer, the Tarkin's Will, which was a Star Destroyer that was near the Death Star when it exploded, and they never really repaired it. Anyway, if you're into the Empire, it's pretty cool. She was trained, she's a protege of Grand Moff Tarkin, and very similar to the character of Admiral Dala from the old expanded universe. And I have no problem with this, that they kind of rewrote the character. But she's very much the Admiral Dala of the new canon from Disney. And I totally dig that, because again, Admiral Dala, they kind of botched up a bit. I think Zara as a character is fantastic, and in Crimson Reign, she gets to do some of her best work. Spoiler alerts. And for those that have read it, you know, when she's outsmarting the rebels who are trying to rescue that last rebel division, on a far off planet that they have to find, and when she makes the Star Destroyer dive down to the planet, and then just before crashing into the planet, she's diving straight towards the rebel encampment, on this planet, and then she pulls up and has the thrusters of the Star Destroyer just light the entire rebel base on fire and just level it. Fuck, that was great shit. I was blown out. I was like, oh my, holy shit, she's gonna do it. She's gonna do it. And she did it. And then, I totally dig how she's, always going after with the sword and, really leads from the front and everything. Just another great, Imperial leader character, much like Tarkin before her, Grand Admiral Thrawn. You think like General Tag, and Admiral Piet, who of course got his great moments in War of the Bounty Hunters. The comic books are doing a fantastic job of creating villains that you believe, that have the history you want, that, and they're selling them and they work. And you totally get Commander Zara taking on Princess Leia. Again, you buy it. It works. You believe it. And attaching her to the character of Tarkin, all these things just really, really sell. And it's so funny to read because it's in such stark contrast to the shitty characters, frankly, that we get introduced to in a lot of Star Wars television, particularly the character of Reva, which, again, bad writing, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, doesn't think things through. You don't buy it. It doesn't work. So I'm so glad that the comic books are treating these characters right. I'm really, really digging what's being brought on here. And so, I love it. And I don't really see any complaints from the fans like I do with TV shows and movies of Star Wars. I don't see any complaints from the fans of, oh, wow, what they're doing in the comics, this is crazy. So again, yes, there are asshole Star Wars fans. I'm not going to say there isn't. But no one's really complaining about female characters because they're female. They're complaining that these characters aren't written well and aren't believable. Because in the comic books, these characters are absolutely written well and believable. I mean, to say nothing of, and just to prove that point, even when it's in a movie, it's okay, because the character of Kira, I don't know that anybody complained about the character of Kira. Sure, they might have complained about the movie Solo overall and that it was pointless or this or that, but nobody was. I don't think anybody was really complaining about the character of Kira. So anyway, this really works, and there's a great moment of realization where Vader is actually, speaking of Kira, where Vader is talking to the Emperor, and he says, how because suddenly the Crimson Dawn becomes a thorn in the side, and that's ultimately where the series ends, is the Empire is finally saying, okay, enough of the shenanigans, we need to wipe out, Crimson Dawn. This has to be brought to an end. But Vader confronts the Emperor and says that, in the fight that he had with Kira, which was one of the highlights for me for War of the Bounty Hunters that I talked about in my review on TIE Fighter Renegades previously, that her fighting style seemed very similar to the Emperor's. And they both kind of realized, oh shit, what could this mean? And they both just look at each other and say, Maul, and they realize that this gal must have been trained by Maul. And I'm interested to see where that's going to go. And frankly, I'm hoping for a moment in Hidden Empire where Kira gets to take on the Emperor himself. And I would love to see what Sheev does in this era, hopefully more than just shooting lightning from his fingertips. How he can actually fight in this era between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where this entire story is taking place. There's a million great moments in this. The characters that they bring in are, all at their A game. Again, I love having the Knights of Ren involved, along with some others. Even in the Dr. Aphra series, what we're getting with Sana Starros, and Dr. Aphra, of course, is a central character in this whole thing. Including Domina Tag. This is a character I haven't talked about. She kind of started taking center stage in War of the Bounty Hunters, where she's the head of the Tag Corporation, which is seemingly the Microsoft or Amazon or whatever you want to call it of the Star Wars galaxy. And another badass character. Again, that adding in of so many female characters. Not only that, they are dominant female characters in the story, and they are large and in charge, and it's really, really wonderful to get that in Star Wars, because we had a dearth of that for decades in Star Wars, where these kinds of characters it just wasn't a thing. So you're getting a lot of that in Dr. Aphra. Also really cool, Commander Tolvan is coming back. Kind of a fan favorite character from the Dr. Aphra series, and she's a love interest to Dr. Aphra. It looks like she'll be coming back for the Hidden Empire series, which I completely applaud. Great character at the time, another one of those great Imperial characters that you totally believe, and that is a successful villain, even though it's a villain character, that would end up turning to a degree. Again, in this case, you got enough of her as the villain that when the turn happened, you went with it, you believed it, and it wasn't like a fifth mission affair like we got with Iden Versio, right, in Battlefront 2. So there's no real missteps here, in my opinion, and I'm very excited for everything they're hinting at. And certainly I hope some of my predictions come true, but if they don't, I really do have confidence in what Charles Soule and Greg Pak are putting down for this trilogy. And I am very curious where they're going to go next. There's certainly stories to explore overall between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and events that happened just before Return of the Jedi. For example, seeing Luke build his lightsaber. Now, we had a deleted scene from Return of the Jedi where he did that, but maybe we can get more of that in this. We know that there's hints of Yoda getting involved at this point, and in fact, maybe he gets injured, and that's why he ends up dying in Return of the Jedi during the Hidden Empire saga, because Kira wants him, wants him to be a part of, the Crimson Dawn, which is odd, but I'll reserve judgment until I see what they do with that. There's other things. Now, there was already a novel before The Force Awakens came out that was part of the new canon that explored how they got Shuttle Tydirian for Return of the Jedi, which is the Lambda-class shuttle they used to, get to Endor in the movie. I was a little worried they were going to contradict that book, because there is where the character of Shara Bay, she ends up stealing a shuttle to escape Tarkin's will, and the Star Destroyer. And I was kind of worried they were going to say that that's Shuttle Tydirian, which wouldn't fit with the canon that we already have. But maybe they could turn that novel into a comic book. I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that there's things we know that have to set up what happens in Return of the Jedi that could still occur in the comic books. So where are the comic books going to go next? Because again, you only have a year's time span between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I'm okay for them to start going post Return of the Jedi, like directly after that. In fact, I'm actually excited for that. I think most fans are. That's what we've always wanted. But I mean, we're getting plenty of that with The Mandalorian and other things anyway. But like, as far as the comic books, like, they've already explored between the original trilogy, between the movies of the original trilogy. You can really only go beyond it. Again, there's a little more to explore before Return of the Jedi, but not much. So I'm guessing in 2023 we're finally going to get past, that movie, and we'll see where things go. And really, if they keep the same creative teams, and I know they can't keep them forever, but if you keep Charles Soule and Greg Pak rolling with this stuff, obviously the Darth Vader series would have to come to an end. But if they want to morph the Darth Vader series into a Sabe comic book, even if we're not going to get a TV series or a movie out of that character, if we could get more adventures of her and the Amidalans or whatever, I'm there. Like, I'm totally up for that comic book. Because anybody that's reading the Darth Vader comic, I would have to assume, would be excited about a Sabe comic, because the character has just worked so well. And even if Sabe stayed like more of an evil character, quote unquote evil, and was on this mission of bringing order, I think that could be interesting. I could dig it. So anyway, that's just some predictions of what might end up happening in the future. Again, I don't really know, that any of this is going to occur, but I'd love for it to do so. But the Crimson Reign comic book series, which ran, again, from the end of 2021, well into just into July of 2022. I mean, it's a real treat. I mean, just some great moments, kick-ass characters, everything you want out of Star Wars. You get the battles, you get the, again, more quotable moments. You get great exploration of characters that you've known for decades. I think it even brings a lot of depth to Darth Vader, this whole thing. I am enjoying the shit out of it. And one of the, just to bring this, while I miss the old expanded universe, and as good as all this stuff is, it's still not as good as much as what was done in the old expanded universe, okay? The new canon will probably never live up to that. But, that said, it's not like the old expanded universe was perfect. Mistakes were made, as MVG would say, right? As a modern vintage gamer would say. Mistakes were made. For example, you killed off so many great characters. Like, they killed off, Thrawn way too early. I mean, there's a slew of characters that we lost so soon, that they can really repair that, I think, and allow characters, or like Prince Shizor, killed him off way too soon. I mean, in one book, and if you keep these characters alive, you could make the galaxy post Return of the Jedi a lot more interesting than what Disney has done so far. So I am hoping, I mean, we already know Thrawn is effectively living past what was originally set up in the old expanded universe. I am hoping Disney resolves those mistakes, and if they do, if we get more adventures of these characters that I've enjoyed for decades, like Thrawn, like Shizor, even if it's like Commander Zara, who's more of an Admiral Dala character, just improved. If they can keep doing things with these characters, like, I'm there, and I will applaud the new canon for giving us that with these incredible fictional creations. So I'll wrap it up with that. Again, I highly recommend, especially if you already went and read War of the Bounty Hunters after my review, Crimson Reign does not disappoint. Just keep on riding. I hope they stick the landing with Hidden Empire. I'm going to assume they will, but we'll see. And of course, I will review it here. That's it for this episode of TIE Fighter Renegades. Nice little solo episode. We'll have Rob back on very soon, and I will see all of you on the other side.